Um, Lots of times when I go and do inspections, you see multiple different and imaginative hazards that people contrive to put into their risk assessments, which is absolutely fine. But I think the hazard is the thing that is likely to cause harm. Then the second part of it, which is the risk, who might be harmed and how might they be harmed. The evaluating of the risks, we follow the one which is likelihood and impact, generally scored between 1 and 5. That's us. That's how we do it. It may be greater numbers. The trouble is, with the greater the number, the more of the variance of what is a 6 and what is a 5, and you know, is that a 2.5, whatever it is. So we go 1 to 5 on the likelihood and impact. And the one that follows that when doing this one, which is the mitigating circumstances, the control measures, you know, what things that we put in place, evaluate the risks, look at the findings and implement it, is the control measures. And the reasons why we do this, and this is where risk assessments link fully into qualifications, training, first aid, have they got the right amount of qualifications, you know, which relates to your procedures that you have in place, because lots of the control measures that you have should be written in your operating documents, so that when you refer back to something, you're referring to something that's formal, written and agreed by everyone within your club organization. Really, really important. Needs to have a date at the end. And then it needs to have a possible review date after that. So we have a date and then a review date. All of our risk assessments are reviewed on an ongoing basis, but they are reviewed yearly prior to the commencement of the staff returning back and major activity happening. Now, as clubs, that may be that you just pluck a date within the year, because if you're working 12 months of the year and you don't close and racing happens all year round, if you're able to do that, you still need to pluck a time when you decide you want to do it. If I'm an inspector at an RWA centre, or if I was part of the HSE and something happened in 2020, I'd want to see that the risk assessment had happened early enough in the year, or the review of them and the update of them had happened early enough in the year, which covers you for most of the year. If they came in and they were looking at, God, Pete, I'm looking at time, I'm waffling here now, so somebody stop me, Pete, and think as I go on. But if HSE and people come in, what they want to do is they want to see a date of a regular review. Now, if that pattern happens to be that it's done in the summer of every year, as long as you've got a record which shows that your risk assessments have been done. And that if it is on a June of every year, that you can show records of June of 2019, 18, 17, 16, 15, and you've got a history. What's also important within identifying risks and doing the risk assessment is that if you identify and you have something that happens that is a significant hazard to your group of people that you're with and you're working with, you need to update your risk assessments there and then. And one of the things that doesn't really come up in risk assessments is culture. Culture's probably for me at the centre, one of the important things, which is people need to talk about what happened, what went wrong, what went wrong, what could have gone wrong, which is more important, which are the near misses. Within the clubs, within the organisation, for us, we have to have a really open learning environment of staff not feeling that they're going to get beaten, club members not feeling they're going to get beaten because something has happened. You're changing it, and you need them to be actively coming forward and reporting it, because it makes the risk assessments more active. There's no point in doing them once a year and then not looking at them again for the rest of that period. So that's where the 5 steps really, really help, and help us, and it's kind of what we do at the centre, to look at that initial risk management. Risk assessments should not be done, well, they might be completed by one person, but they have to be shared and agreed by a group and multiple people, and especially the staff and the members who have active roles within it, because it's all right for the head of safety within a club or an organisation knowing what all the risk assessments are, but if that's not shared and agreed with people, how can we expect them to follow it? So within the centre, every time we do, so I'm kind of jumping around here, but we do a lot of reviewing, active reviewing at the time of major incidents or accidents if we see them, or near misses. All things are talked about in daily staff meetings if anything happens that's live, but this is a very large organisation which meets twice a day that allows us to review what we do. But the principles of sharing the risk assessments with a group of people and feeling that they are actively involved in it tends to get a greater buy-in to what you're doing and what we're doing. So, you know, if I was to say anything to the group, that signatures, regular yearly signatures as part of your RWA inspections, if your schools, to say that your staff have read, understood and will comply with the operational guidelines and risk assessments attached. So that way, you could say it's just a cover-all, but it's a way that in the end, you've got an agreement from the group of people that yes, they have. But you're right, Sue. Some people say that they have read the first page and just go, I don't need to bother. And that's always the whole. And the only way you can do that, if you're a larger club or organisation, is get those people together and check and challenge them on the occasional time, just to make sure people are updated and involved. And it may be monthly, quarterly, 6 monthly meetings where you get together and discuss them. Any questions or thoughts have come up? I can't really see anything, Pete, within the chats.
Jamie, this is Nigel. If I can just chip in.
Yes.
As a chartered environmental health officer, I enforced health and safety for many, many years in South East Wales. What I would say is, from a risk assessment, is for those of you who are thinking and saying, well, what if I do the risk assessment wrong? The answer is, from a legal perspective, is as long as you have tried your very best to assess the risk, there isn't a wrong answer. You know, all of us may assess a risk slightly different. Where you go wrong is by not assessing the risk. So a club may get some criticism about how they assessed a risk, but they are unlikely to be prosecuted if they've assessed it. If they haven't assessed the risk, they will be prosecuted. That's the big difference. So don't be afraid of risk assessment, and don't think, well, what happens if I get it wrong? The answer is, we will all assess things slightly different. As long as you've made your best effort, that's all that the health and safety executive and the enforcing authorities are looking for.
Can I ask a question? Mike Green from North Wales Power and Sale. I absolutely agree with everything you just said there about risk assessments and method statements. Is the same thing going to apply with this COVID though? If you make a risk assessment on the...
Oh yeah. To answer your question,
social distancing.
I mean, the answer is yes. You have to undertake risk assessments and follow. Have you all seen the HSE and government guidance with regards to COVID safe activities? They have issued a number of documents with regards to how organisations and companies are to operate in a COVID safe environment. The key difference about normal risk assessment and the hierarchy of control, which the lower one is PPE, is we cannot use PPE against COVID-19. The only sectors that are allowed to do it are healthcare.
Right.
So a little bit in answer to your question, if it helps at all, is following the guidance that's been given. I mean, I tried to print it out this morning and I wish I hadn't, because I've just ruined my son's ability to do any homework or any schoolwork today. Is in conjunction with, this is us specifically because we're part of Sport Wales, but in conjunction with Welsh Government and following the 7 guiding principles that are associated with it, we've had to produce a fairly large document which lets us use the guidance that we've been given to assess against the activities that we've got, to then write brand new specific operational procedure with its own set of risk assessments just for COVID-19. The one thing that you don't want to do, and it's clearly set out in our guidance, is you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. In other words, don't change all of your risk assessments. Your risk assessments for your activity should still be the same. What you do is you add in all the different things that you can do about social distancing, cleansing. We've got general principles, cleanliness of the centre, social distancing. Oh, it's got a whole load of information that's been put in there. It's a draft copy at the moment. We're all just digesting it and adding to it as we speak, but this is in preparation before activity takes place. And so as soon as we put in new processes, so as we talked about earlier, as soon as I put in a new process, or the centre puts in a new process, we need to risk assess against it using the same principles of before of hazard, risk, impact likelihood, control measures, and further requirements, and then date. The reason why we don't change our main risk assessments is COVID-19 and the guidance is changing so often, so differently, conflicting. At one time we couldn't take ibuprofen, now we can take it, it seems to be. So the operational procedures document is fairly flexible to react to the changing guidance that we're going to get. But if we didn't have it, and as Nigel explained, and somebody came in and said, why haven't you done it? It's not, I don't think you could open something up as where we have members of the public, or you have club members coming on your facility as a club, and you haven't done something about it. Doing nothing is not acceptable. It would not be, you know, as Nigel quite rightly pointed out, you would leave yourselves wide open to criticism, if at best criticism, but if at worst prosecution, if you had done nothing to allow your members to come back on site, or how you operate. Any further questions, or does that all sound a bit frightening to everybody?
Thanks, Jamie. I just showed the link wasn't working from a PowerPoint, but it showed the link to the which is one thing you were referring to, at you, Nigel, was the guide to
I guess the sort of end of my.
Oh, we've lost you, Nigel.
Yeah, actually, Rosie, there are other documentation that came out last week, which if you go to the HSE website, it'll talk about by sector on the front. It'll link you to the UK Gov site. Download the documents, and there's some really useful guides and activity sheets that you can use in trying to establish a COVID safe environment.
Yeah, there's the working in the outdoors one as well, isn't there?
Crawford?
Fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay? Oh, I've got a specific question. I've been looking, like yourselves probably, at the Health and Safety Executive website for the directions. I'm reasonably comfortable with what's required of me in terms of social distancing, use of facilities, etc. My specific question is around buoyancy aids and cleaning of them. We, as well as running formal courses, hire out a lot of equipment. So a specific buoyancy aid may be used multiple times in one day. I've got a lot of buoyancy aids, but even so, on a busy day, there's no way I can actually have sufficiency of stock for them to be allowed to dry, as is currently directed, for 72 hours.
I can take this question if you want me to.
Very nice.
I mean, there are two ways that you can deal with this. One is by using a chlorine-based solution to be able to dip your buoyancy aids in. However, I would not suggest that you do that particularly. The reason being is the concentration that you would need is 1,000 parts per million, and that will degrade the integrity of the buoyancy aid.
Indeed.
Now, we in the Red Cross and across a number of the sectors are using a product called Ramsol, Ramsol. Now you can buy it in spray cans, and it's basically a spray disinfectant that you spray on, and if you let it dry, it then totally disinfects any surface. It doesn't degrade the surface. The good thing about it is been specifically tested against encapsulated viruses, which COVID-19 is an encapsulated virus. And it's basically been used across a lot of sectors, in vehicles, etc., where you've got multiple people going in and out of vehicles. We are using it in the Red Cross for our services where we are taking people home from hospital, and we can need to decontaminate the vehicle after the patient. One thing I will warn you is it's not cheap. It's about £6 a can, but you could use that, or if you could use chlorine, but as I said earlier, it will degrade your buoyancy aids.
Nigel, can I ask a question? Is
Sorry,
that soft surfaces and hard surfaces?
Soft, hard surfaces, yeah. It's designed for use on all surfaces.
Can I come back on that? Sorry.
Yep.
So thank you for clarifying the chlorine degradation of product. I actually got confirmation from Milton. I wrote to them to try and understand exactly what that might, and they came back to me unequivocally saying that will degrade your product, so don't use it. Daft question, I'm not a virologist. The advice currently is that for me to wash my hands, 20 seconds exposure to soap. Soap is readily available, relatively cheap, relative to the Ramsol product. If I was to make a soap solution and immerse product in it, buoyancy aids and similar, washing liquid or some readily available product like that, would that sufficiently degrade the virus that I could be confident to reissue it?
The answer is yes, provided that you are regularly changing the solution. Now, an encapsulated virus basically means that it is surrounded by a lipid or fat coating, and the detergent will break down that lipid covering, which basically then kills the virus. So the answer is yes, you could, but you need to make sure that you are very regularly changing the solution.
I'm mindful of other people's time, and what I'm looking for is a relatively low cost and simple solution, which is easy for me to manage. I could quite happily go out and buy a lot of spray, but I'm concerned that a spray may not be introduced into the intricacies of a buoyancy aid, with all the webbing and corners and all the rest of it. Yep. I might be exposed to, well, you didn't clean it very well.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for a simple product I can immerse and say, okay, hold this buoyancy aid under the water for an amount of time, replace the solution on a regular basis, and we're good to go.
There is also another product that is used in hospitals, which is called Hospec. What I'll try and do is I'll try and get some information on these and send them to Pete so Pete can disseminate it. And this is basically a disinfectant and a detergent, so it will clean and also disinfect. And it's designed specifically to be used on soft furnishings, so it shouldn't degrade buoyancy aids.
That would be most helpful. And if I may, without wishing to hog you, the risk assessments, therefore, we are dealing in terms of risk assessments with this same risk. So the risk isn't specific to Plasmeni, to Cardigan Bay water sports. This is the same risk of this COVID-19 is applying across the piece. So would it be sensible for us all to share the same risk assessment in respect of dealing with buoyancy aids, life jackets, wetsuits, etc.?
No, for the simple reason is that risk assessment is based on activity, and the way you do your activities will be different. The risk bit, as Jamie said, is the hazard is the potential to cause harm. The risk is the likelihood that harm will take place. So we are all being exposed to the same level of risk from COVID, but how we are undertaking our activities may be different. So we could have a generic risk assessment, but everybody would need to change it to meet their own circumstances.
Right, that's what I would be looking for our national governing body to provide me with. so that I can say, because ultimately what happens is any incident, I'm referred back to, well, what did your national governing body recommend? Right now, the national government body is saying, refer to the Life Jacket Association, which is an American, if you follow the link on the RYA website, it goes back to, which is an American organization, and I've emailed them and had some dialogue there, and they're saying that their instruction is ambiguous. Nigel, this morning, you've been much more accurate and specific, and I'm very grateful to you for that.
Just Crawford, just to answer you slightly as well, and it depends on the individual circumstances of the centre, and you know, we feel the same issues. We've had conversations with Milton. We are in the unfortunate position of having a huge amount of equipment available for us to use, and in the amber stages before we go to green, if we have assessed that it is possible to run activity, it will be on relatively low levels, and we've kind of worked out that we have enough kit to not use it again and again on the same day. So, but very fortunate, but unfortunate that the kit is supposed to be used by the 90 to 100 people every day that are in the centre. So for us in our initial stages, we have luckily enough equipment to not have to overly worry about that. But I do like the idea of the spray, albeit expensive. The Ramsol stuff seems great to us, and I'll be working with my maintenance officers fairly quickly after this, Nigel, just to see if they can source that fairly regularly. But yeah, I do feel for everybody in this. We are fortunate, but unfortunate. We should be full of people, but we know that's not likely to happen for a while until we get to green and beyond green. Okay, shall we, unless there's any other questions, shall we move on to the next slide as we are rapidly approaching?
Jamie, I've got a question in the chat box from Andy. He's asking, is there a risk to using ordinary hard soap in toilets? So I don't know whether Andy's, whether he wants to come in and say it, but that's his question.
Is it what?
Is there a risk to using ordinary hard soap in toilets? So I'm assuming he means using, this might be one for Nigel, I'm assuming by this he means like a block of soap rather than, you know, a pump dispenser or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other alternatives we've been considering have been insisting that people bring their own soap in with them.
Okay. I mean, to quickly answer this from a microbiological perspective, hard soap are very good at carrying contamination and bacteria and viruses, which is why liquid soap are recommended. So you're only exposed, each person is only exposed to the liquid that comes out the dispenser. So I would not be recommending you use hard soap. Use liquid soap.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. That answers Andy's. I've got another question. What about a steam cleaner to use in terms of cleaning life jackets?
Yep, steam cleaning of items works. Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's all there is in the chat box at the moment.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm sure this is going to overrun, but if everybody's still interested and engaged, it's really good, and there's lots of great questions going on. So let's keep it going. Can we move on to the next slide, which I think was are we on beyond identifying risks, or are we on? Yeah, we're on to identifying risks.
Yeah, we've hang on, bear with me. Just so there's the, if I just share the screen. So hopefully you've got the
one after that one, then the one next to that one.
That one is, the next one is just taking us to the links.
Okay, well,
website.
I've got a little bit more on that. So one of the things that obviously when identifying risks, we all look at the activity and we try and manage it as best we can do. But there are some risks that we manage in the outdoor industry. They're almost they're known knowns. You know, you go to your club, and if you did accident analysis, I should imagine just launching or landing would have quite a lot of them. The boom would account for some significant cuts and bangs on the head. Now, sailing doesn't stop just because that happens. Fortunately, unfortunately, we at the National Centre in the mid to late 80s introduced helmets onto all beginners, so you could probably blame us for that one. And does it stop the thing happening? No, it doesn't make it happen, and people realise that soon enough that they're not invincible and that they do have to get out of the way of the boom. But it's like you can't get it all out of the way. We had an incident, I can share it with people, where somebody got hurt. It then went beyond us. It went to the RYA, and some of the suggestions for sailors was to wear gum shields. Well, that's just not ever going to happen, and nor would the RYA allow that to happen anyway. So we identify our risks under a number of measures. There are historical ones that we know that we have potential problems with, things that come up again and again. We have a look at the possible unknowns, because they're the unknowns of the things that could happen but haven't happened because we've put good mitigating guidance in to the procedures which help lower that risk. And one of the other things that we use when we're trying to identify the risks, and it kind of comes in the effective reviewing section as well, which is we use all the accident analysis and data. God forbid I ever say that data is what drives me, but more and more these days, data is fact. Fact I can't ignore, and fact is something that we have to act on. So if people don't fill in accident forms and don't fill in near-miss forms for you, you miss potential data that you could use to run more effective risk assessments with it. It makes me sound like I'm really excited about this, which I'm not. It's just part of my job. What I like doing is watching people do activity and develop people. But to enable to do that, we have to get this right. So filling in near misses is part of identifying, because they're the things that could have happened but didn't happen, are probably some of the more important things, because if it did happen, and it's generally related to rescue boats and collisions and other water users, coastal users and other lake users with fishermen, there are multiple hazards potentially and risks involved with multiple groups working on the water. Getting our staff is still a challenge, but we do it because we review it regularly, is getting them to fill in the near miss forms and all the first aid forms when they come in. All of that data is then collated, put together and statistically shown over the years to be able to show if we have trends. And a trend in the accidents, I mean, don't forget, we've got a lot of 16,000 days. We were up to 21,000 student days a number of years ago, but 16,000 student days of activity allows us to collect a lot of data. Very fortunately, through good staff training measures, policies, procedures, all of that kind of stuff, the incident rate is managed down to be very low, but they do happen, and that data is incredibly important to us. So any way that you can effectively gather that info, show what happens the most, will then allow you to show that you've mitigated against something, because the man with the curly wig will surely have a look at your past data and records, and if they see a pattern and you've not done anything about it, then they are likely to, I mean, Nigel will know more about this than I will, but they are likely to hone in on those kind of things. So any changes in procedure, which is what we've got with the COVID-19 document and our return to work here now, we've got a set of risk assessments which go against that, which is based on whatever the current guidance is. And the challenge with this is, as you quite rightly pointed out, Nigel, it changed last week. So what you might write has to be in a method that is flexible enough for you to go and alter it. And it seems like it's going to be a lot of work, but unfortunately, yes, it's going to be a lot of work to ensure that we can go and continue what we love and the activities that we all do and are passionate about in an environment which is as reasonably practicable, which is a word that they use in the law all the time, safe to go and do. We can never say that it's ultimately safe, but we can say that we've done everything that is reasonably practicable. Accidents, incidents, near misses, statistics. So our risk assessments, in the effective reviewing of them, they are definitely not, I said this at the beginning, it is not a dead document. It is a live document. It is something to go and use, review, look at on a fairly regular basis. Now, we don't get a huge number of accidents and incidents. And a lot of ours come from unaccompanied minors running around the site after we've finished doing them. And I don't know whether that's the same in the clubs. It's the kids that are playing around using the oppie spritz, the spears, and all of those other things that cause a lot of the minor incidents that go into our statistics. And what we're looking for when we do this, when we're looking at our regular review of accidents and statistics and analysis and near misses, is looking for trends, anomalies, and if something looks funny, then it needs investigate. It's not a signature. You just don't go, oh, I've seen that before, and sign it if it's not there. Well, on our accident forms, we've got things, sections where there's a management review, there's a review afterwards, which is a review with the staff. Then there's another section which comes after it, which says any accidents or any actions taken as a result or changes. So it's very important that if you've got something that you've had when you're reviewing it, make sure you follow the whole procedure. And some of the bigger accidents and things that we have might turn up into documents and bits of paper that would look about that thick. It's a funny one. I went to a presentation done by insurers. Insurers, we all know what insurers are like. You know, we think that they're working on our behalf, but I'm never entirely sure, actually. And what they said to us at the time, and it stuck with me for years, it is, and it's wrong, but the weight of paper, you could have all the evidence that you needed on 2 sheets of paper or 3 sheets of paper. But in a court of law, generally it's the weight of paper, and someone I'm quite happy to be challenged on this, but this is what we've been saying, but it's the weight of paper, the volume of paper, your supporting evidence in what went wrong, which will help protect you. It might not fully, as Nigel has already said, you might still get a bit of a smacked hand for it, but you can't be done for not doing it properly. And I think if you ever have any major incidents, really you do need to go through that and do it really, really properly, get all the supporting evidence, put everything together. It stays in a specific file. It's kept private, because a lot of this, I mean, the reason we can't share lots of stuff with you guys is through GDPR, because it's got people's names and dates, but all of our stuff now is kept electronically. It happens on paper, although we're likely to go over to digital, and that is all kept private to all that. So that is how we do that. So,
oh, Mr. Muscat.
I've got a question, I think. I think what I've always been told, and I'm interested to know what Nigel and Jamie think about this, that we're not trying to remove risk, we're trying to manage risk. And that they're with the COVID thing, you know, we have a risk. We don't necessarily have to remove it, but we do have to demonstrate we've managed it. Is that true for COVID, Nigel?
The problem that we've got with COVID as a disease is the fact that there is no immunity in the community, for want of a better phrase. We also don't have any treatments for it. So when you go into hospital, I mean, to be quite candid, when you go into hospital, you are put on oxygen if you require it, in order for the body to be able to heal itself. And if the body can't, then I'm afraid people die. And that's the reality, the grim realities of where we are. If and when we get a vaccine that is efficacious and gives protection, then that will be the game changer. The reason why we don't have such a big issue every year with influenza across the whole of the population is the fact that we have a vaccine. So which protects people. The issue, I think, with regards to COVID-19 is we need to be reducing the risk as much as possible, and particularly from our vulnerable groups, those that are highly vulnerable due to age and due to any underlying medical conditions, and therefore the social distancing and hand washing and reducing social interaction is the control measures that we have to put in place. The reason why the Health and Safety Executive have said you cannot use, or you should not use, PPE for COVID, it's not saying you can't use PPE if you're using a grinding wheel or if you're using something that is noisy and you have to wear ear protection, it is that in reality, the PPE that is being used, PPE just being worn to protect against COVID-19 isn't that effective. Face coverings are not effective. They are about as much use as putting a handkerchief across your mouth. So they actually don't protect the person that's wearing them. What they do is they keep, for want of a better phrase, the snot in. So they have limited effect on people in a wider context. So all of these people that you see walking around and going into shops wearing face coverings are not protecting themselves at all. They do better not to wear them in some respects, because all that happens is they keep touching them and moving them, and they're touching everything else, and all they're doing is moving potentially contaminated virus on their hands up to their orinasal area, which is, and COVID-19 affects the lungs, and therefore they're moving potential virus onto their areas of their face where they would ingest it into the lungs, and therefore could get COVID-19. So we do better to not touch our face, wash our hands regularly, and maintain social distancing so that we actually break the chain of infection.
Nigel, Duncan's just asked, what about visors?
Okay, you see an awful lot of people wearing visors. Visors are only there to stop the virus getting into your eyes. They're against splash. So if you look at the clinical guidance, they are there for what are known to be worn for what are known as aerosol generating procedures, which are things that the clinicians are doing with regards to tracheotomies and high flow nasal oxygen. So in reality, visors don't do anything, to be honest with you.
Thank you for that. But as I say, that's really useful. Jamie?
Yeah, it's partly a discussion with Nigel as well. If you look at the guidance given out by the new first responders thing, which is one of the risks that we struggle to assess under COVID, is that in an ideal world where nothing goes wrong, nobody needs assistance, and everything trundles on and it's absolutely perfect and nothing goes wrong. The single biggest concern for the centre, through me, through the centre, through Matt, who I work with closely, Ali and Stephen, is the what if. What if you have to do resus? Well, currently, the guidance that we are using in our document at the moment says no mouth-to-mouth on adults and children. It's your decision. There are things that children get that are more likely to be asphyxia-based type things, why their hearts might stop, and that you might need to do that. And really, we're trying to write stuff at the moment and looking at how we're going to train staff with dummies, which is their dummy, and we have to change the lungs and disinfect all the surfaces afterwards. But we're going to have to do a bit of practice on doing it. Now, I hate to be the one tempting fate, which is why I'm tapping wood, not that it makes any difference at all. If I look at the statistics and history within the centre over the number of years, I can think of one resuscitation required, and that was from somebody who was having a heart attack, which subsequently, unfortunately, they died from, and there was nothing that we could do. So we worry about the things that are least likely to happen, which will have the greatest impact if they do, on the individual doing it and on the person that's actually got it. And really, I don't have any answers, but these are questions you need to pose to yourselves within the kind of COVID document that you might write before the club gets back and operates, what you're going to do. That's where you need to try and keep abreast of whatever the latest data is, and as confusing as that may be, because it changes on a regular basis, it's what we are going to have to do. It's going to be our new normal. The trouble is, we're all hoping to go back to whatever the old normal was. Well, the new normal is going to be something that is completely different, and we're just going to have to adapt if we want to continue. Sorry, I sound like a preacher and I'm on my soapbox, but that's I think that's what we're going to have to do.
Jamie, can I just jump in? Yeah, there's a few questions about PPE coming in and saying that, questioning, should we not include PPE in our COVID-19 risk assessments? And another one is, are we allowed to provide staff with PPE? So Nigel, can I ask you to come back on that?
Yeah, the Health and Safety Executive in their direction are very clear that PPE against COVID is only effective in a clinical environment, and we shouldn't be using it. PPE, one thing they do say, though, as I've said earlier, is if you are using PPE for protection against noise or other normal risk assessments, then you will still provide that PPE, eye protection, hearing protection, gloves, etc., etc., etc. It's the surgical gloves, aprons, and orinasal protection, either surgical masks or surgical respirators, that you can't issue to members of staff.
Okay, thank you very much. And another question we're talking about, how do we, and I know this has come up in quite a few clubs, is how do we socially distance on a cruising yacht or a yacht?
I'll try with that one, which is a fairly bland RWA response. There is a new set of guidance on training, RWA training centres, that came out yesterday. I haven't had a chance to fully digest it. I don't know if Jamie has.
No, I'm just having a look for hours. Keep going, Pete.
But yeah, it's difficult. And at the end of the day, if you don't think you can do it and your risk assessment says you can't, then I think you shouldn't be operating. And that is a harsh reality at this time.
So I can only say what we're doing, and we won't be started. We can't start cruising because we can't manage, firstly, our prime responsibility as an employer to our staff member. We can't be assured that they are going to be in an environment that is 2 meters at the moment, whatever the social distancing is, not touching multiple things. Some of the advice and guidance that the RWA had given out previously might work on a keelboat, but is not going to work on a boat where people sleep in a small confined space. I cannot see at the moment measures or things that are in place that will allow us to resume cruising for a while. And I don't know what a while is, and it will change. Keelboating, we've said, if they come as a competent family group, it's a bit like dinghy sailing. If it's a competent family group or competent group of people who cohabit in the same area at the moment, or 2 families that are mixing, whatever it is, we are in our maybe stage when we get to amber of whether we think that that's going to be possible. But certainly in the green stage, keelboating is there. The issue is always going to be if they can get onto those things from a pontoon or from, and they don't require boats to take them in and out. As soon as boats or other people are involved, then you can't follow current social distancing guidelines to get people off and on the craft, unless you take them out one at a time and you happen to have a 6-meter boat with a good 2 meters difference between you and the people sat at the back.
Jamie, I think, and again, I haven't read it in any detail, that there is talk, and it may be in this current document, of relaxing the requirement for residentials within cruising to allow people to return back to their home ports. Whether that will help, I don't know.
I don't, and I think this is the issue for us. We're just looking at the data at the moment, and I guess for us, looking primarily at our staff, who are our, we have our major obligations to.
That's really good. I think we'll probably be worth, as things move on, talking more about training centres and those procedures. But just to sort of give a feel of where we are, for those members who are, those people here who are from clubs, how many of you have risk assessed your restart to boating? How successful has that been? And is there anything interesting come out of that? So Ken's got something to say on that.
Yeah, and I've got a question from Paul as well.
I'm just saying that I completed a risk assessment for, we started off with paddling, then we were going to move on to paddling with the use of toilets in the club. But I mean, we've had advice since then, and we've withdrawn the use of the club's toilet facility, even though we had facilities in place for hand washing and wiping down areas and things like that. We wait, we just be patient, basically. But over the past 2 weeks, I've done 4 risk assessments. But there we go. And that have been, this meeting has been very useful. In fact, because it pointed out, like, well, yeah, because we are a recognised training centre, and eventually we'll be operating again as a recognised training centre, we'll need to risk assess that process, which is entirely different from individual members actually going out and sailing or paddling. One thing we have done, though, is we've used a booking system to reduce any numbers. So we only allow people to go paddling for a couple hour slot. And we only allow two slots per any similar time period. Yeah, this has been very useful, actually. For instance, pointing out the our way advice that came out yesterday on things like this. So I'll be consulting that and possibly altering my risk assessment to suit.
Oh, thank you for that, Ken. Reece, did you? I keep more concerned we've ignored your question. Would you like to ask your question to the group?
Yeah, sorry, I posted it again just because I thought someone might have.
No, I hadn't missed you, Reece. I was coming to you next.
That's fine. So we've set up a group and we've been talking and discussing lots of things, and I've been keeping an eye on what other clubs are doing in the area and further abroad in England and stuff. And a lot of clubs are having the question of what to do in a rescue situation. And the control measure that seems to come up is carrying masks or using buffs when you've got to come within that 2 metre. And what Nigel was just saying about not using PPE sort of contradicts that. So I just wondered what people's thoughts were on that situation.
I can give you an initial one. So in part of the risk assessment, and the discussions were actually had 2 or 3 weeks ago in something that I joined a while ago, we will, to try and control some of the factors, it may only be that activity can take place in conditions, firstly, that are not overly challenging. In other words, those conditions where people are least likely to require assistance. Now, this is not great for all the performance sailors who want to go out in 20 knots of wind, 25 knots of wind, and go and do all that kind of stuff. But this is the initial stages while we do it. At the centre, when to get staff back on site and when we're allowed to do training, we will be looking at ourselves how we might do some of that assisting to keep that social distance. But initially, in all of the risk assessments we've got, and it generally sits in our 4 columns of yes, no, no, maybe. In other words, these are the black, red, amber and green, is that when we're into the amber and green stage, the maybe is down in the formats that we put down that have gone off for review, is because there are too many other factors of, you can't give a wind strength, you can't do this, it depends on sea state, temperature, wind direction, how fast the tide is going, multiple other things. So we've steered away from a specific wind strength and more related to the conditions that are there based on the group's ability. So it stays dynamic and fluid all of the time. And that will be extremely difficult, I'm sure, for you guys with multiple different members within the sailing clubs that all sail at different standards.
I mean,
go on.
Sorry, the issue that I would say with regards to Reese's question about clubs talking about use of masks and buffs. Well, first of all, the health and safety executive said you can't use masks. And as I've said about face coverings, buffs will not provide you with any protection. The only sort of area where we could look towards is what the health and safety executive is saying with regards to those people that work together. They talk about cohorts. You can cohort where activity has to take place, so you would have the same people working together. I think and that means routinely day in, day out. I think it's a little difficult. I mean, in clubs, sorry, in centres that are commercial, you would be able to cohort people together. And when they're working together, you need to make sure that they're working side by side. They're not looking close to, if you have to look close to together, then you maintain the 2 metre social distance. If in a safety boat, as long as you're looking in different directions, you would be okay. And I think, from a rescue perspective, if it was a case of you drag the person out of the water as quickly as possible and then maintain the distance, having checked that they are okay, and then maintain distance as much as possible and not have your faces looking in the same direction. I think that is the only way that you could really do it. However, the point that I would make is that this really needs to be a safety critical situation, not routine capsize drills, etc., where you're interacting and people are getting wet. I think, you know, as Jamie has said, we need to reduce the likelihood of somebody needing rescue and recovery as much as possible to reduce the risk of us interacting in an unsafe way, if that helps.
Nigel, just to reinforce that point, the guy who drives our safety boat at Llanfyddwchan is a health and safety manager. He's of the opinion that the risk associated with reaching in, pulling someone out and putting them one end of a 5 metre rib is incredibly low, and sees no reason for that. We had a conversation about potentially PPE, because the RNLI must have an answer to this. They must be adopting an approach, and that if it was going to be any different to that which this chap had been thinking about, then the RNLI must have an answer to it, because obviously it's their meat and drink.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Lance. I mean, Red Cross Training, which is part of the group that produces the First Aid at Work manual, which the RWA don't use now, but they are in discussions with the Health and Safety Executive about how we can safely deliver first aid training, because there are elements of first aid training that you inevitably have to get close to the casualty. My perception is that whilst we've got the guidance that came out sort of last week, which says thou shalt not, I think that going forward, the Health and Safety Executive are going to have to look at particular sectors where it's unavoidable. So what I would say is this is an emerging feast, and so I mean, we at Llangors are not open. I'm the safety officer. We're not open because the vast majority of our people live further than 5 miles away. And with the 5 mile travel restriction, we can't travel to the sailing club anyway. So basically, I think what I would say is we just need to keep an eye on what direction is coming out from the enforcing authorities as COVID goes further on, because I think it will change.
I think it's interesting, Nigel, that if you look at some of the other sports guidance at the moment, Welsh Triathlon, slightly different, but you can think about this in a rescue situation in a powerboat, that all cyclists training at the moment have a recommended, if they're in group training, have a recommended distance of 20 meters apart because of the high energy work that they do and the expelled air that might fall behind them. And if you put that into a sailor working in a hard sailing environment and it's breezy, when we're saying don't go out when it's breezy, but it is possible to have them in the boat. You know, for us, we would be suggesting that they sat behind the person driving the boat. So whatever air that they're at, I mean, they're still at risk of the person driving the boat. I'd be really interested, and if you're able to point us when you provide the info on the section which says no mask. And is that no masks? Because what we've seen in the current guidance that I'm looking at the moment is that when giving first aid, what the guidance that we've been given at the moment is the person giving first aid and the person receiving it should both wear face masks. Now that's either to protect people from themselves, not necessarily from the spray. And certainly when doing CPR, they're talking about having a covering over the face so that the air that comes out of this person is not likely to go too near you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a disparity at the moment between the United Kingdom Resuscitation Council and the European Resuscitation Council are in one camp, and Public Health England and the NHS are in the other. And the Resuscitation Council is saying that rescue breaths from CPR are a aerosol generating procedure, and the NHS and Public Health England are saying it's not. Which the Health and Safety Executive are backing the government. So hence the reason why they are saying basically you don't wear PPE. The person that's delivering the CPR would wear PPE if they have it, or what's supposed to happen is the first person on the scene is supposed to start giving CPR, no rescue breaths, until somebody with CPR somebody with PPE can come and take over. But what you would do is you'd put a covering over the mouth of the person that you are over the patient, so they can still breathe and maintain their airway, but you're absorbing any excretions that come out as they are breathing in and out.
Yeah, and I think this has been the major challenge for us. Sorry, Pete, to cut in one more thing. The major challenge for us is that sourcing it. So likelihood and impact, if we look at the number of times that this has happened in the 35 years that I've been at the centre, which is so small, but we still have to provide enough PPE in the event that it might happen, and multiples of it, and that has been difficult. But one thing that has changed, we have now been able to get the things that we can't use, which are the face masks, 4 first aid kits, to make sure that we've got enough of a supply of them, because apparently that supply chain is easing now and they are more readily available. Sorry, Pete.
No, I just wanted to bring things to a close. I think it's really good. I'd be interested to know, I see this conversation could go on for a long time, and I'm happy for that to happen, but I know that people have sort of booked their time to be at this. So please, can you email me or Rosie any questions you've got? We can pass those on and get them answered. Or if you can think of any further forum topics, we can do some more. We're going to be planning what we're going to do over the next few weeks. So if we want one specifically on first aid, we could do that. We want one on safety boating, or one on training centres, because those seem to be the 3 focuses that we're generating at the moment. So are there any last questions? Let's do all 3 from Reece, so that's perfect. Are there any final questions about things that we need answering now about opening in our clubs this week? Cool. In that case, I'll just hand over to Jamie for a finishing statement, say, and then Nigel for a finishing statement, and then we can all have our lunch.
Before you do that, I've recorded it, and apologies, I didn't start that right at the very beginning. I missed a few minutes. But if anybody's got an issue with me recording it, please just stick it in the chat. Just let me know. Hopefully that's okay. But please let me know if you've got you don't want me to, and I won't post it anyway.
If that's a problem, we won't share it. Yeah, if we could just have a couple of closing statements, that would be fantastic. But I personally, my closing statement is thank you very much, Nigel and Jamie. I think they answered some extremely difficult questions extremely professionally. So thank you to them. So Jamie, last thoughts?
Yeah, just again, good luck, everybody. You know, feel free to, we're all in the same situation here. We're all trying to put things in place for us to allow to continue to do activities. So don't shy away from risk assessments and methods. Use the data that you can get. Encourage as much sharing of that information and updating with your team that you work with as part of the club. And as a method of effectively reviewing it and making sure that you protect the people that come on site and use your facilities, and ultimately the person who's responsible in the end for ensuring that it's done. So good luck.
Thank you. Nigel?
Nothing other than to really say that, you know, reducing exposure is the best way to stop there being a problem. So 2 meter social distancing, washing your hands, and trying to reduce the amount of mixing between household groups is the way forward, which I know is difficult. But all I would say is stay safe.
Thank you.
And on Nigel's comment, we've already got a cohort plan in place, so that's how we're hoping to move forwards. Mostly that if one cohort gets it, we've still got other people that can come into work while something's going on, but it just reduces the number of people. So, right. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosie, any last thing to say?
No, I think it's been very, very useful, and hopefully people got their questions answered. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Nigel. You're both of you just wealth of knowledge. So thank you very much.
But if you think of anything, I certainly feel slightly overwhelmed by the information I've got. But please, you've probably got either mine or Rosie's email address. Send us the questions, and we'll pass those on to our experts. So thank you very much.
And I will send the information that I said that I will to Pete and Rosie for dissemination.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.